Are you sick of waking up with anxiety and regret after drinking? I get it. I was a weekend binge drinker, fooling myself into believing I was detoxing all week, only to retox every weekend and live completely outside of alignment with my values. As a former personal trainer who cared about health, that disconnect pushed me to finally make a change. I'm Maureen Bankovich, and this is Sober Fit Life, a podcast where we get real about alcohol, share powerful stories, and learn from wellness experts so you can thrive physically, mentally, and emotionally. Let's get sober fit. Have you ever Googled, "Am I an alcoholic?" Me too. And here's the thing, it's not a helpful question. Those quizzes just slap on a label. Yes, you are. No, you're not. But what if it's not about the label and more about how drinking actually makes you feel? That's why I created Am I Drinking Too Much? It's the quiz I wish had existed when I was searching. No scare tactics, no rock bottom required. You'll get your results and a free guide that explains gray area drinking, plus 3 science-backed strategies to reduce or interrupt cravings. Take it at soberfitchick.com/MI. That's MI, as in, am I drinking too much? soberfitchick.com/MI. Hello, everybody. I cannot wait to introduce you to my guest today, Dr. Erin Kinney, someone who has already had a positive impact on my own health journey. And Dr. Erin Kinney is known as the stress reset expert. She is a licensed naturopathic doctor, and she specializes in helping patients who are struggling with exhaustion, adrenal fatigue, hormone imbalances, and more. What's truly remarkable about Dr. Kinney is her ability to dig deep into the root causes of issues like chronic stress, fatigue, and anxiety. And I know she has helped me so much. Her holistic approach involves everything from personalized diet, lifestyle changes, and cutting-edge genetic testing and natural remedies. So I love to welcome you to the show, Erin. I'm going to call you Erin today,
Yeah,
Dr. Kinney
fine.
at the
Call me
office.
Erin. Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
And I'd love for you to introduce yourself and share a little bit
Sure.
about what you do. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about alcohol and how it affects all these, systemic issues that you treat.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited you started this podcast because it's such an important topic, and I think particularly in women. I mean, I treat both men and women, but I see more so in women. Alcohol is a problem, and I think women aren't really labeled as much. And I know you guys talk about this a lot, but and women, it has a major impact on your hormones and on your body's ability to cope with stress. And so, I treat a lot of patients that are very, very stressed out, and I talk a lot about my patients external stressors versus internal stressors. And an external stressor would be a job, maybe a relationship, maybe your kids, maybe something that's outside of your body. That could be pandemic, that could be, election stress, or whatever that might be. Something that we don't always have control over. And internal stressors are things like a chronic infection or diet, or things that are going into your body, or alcohol, right? And I think a lot of times we use alcohol, and I've used alcohol, I know you're using that, but
Yeah.
we use it as a way to cope with stress. But unfortunately, alcohol is causing more physiologic stress inside your body. So you're like replacing the external stressors with another stress, and almost a more damaging one because of the impact alcohol has on so many parts of your body. And we can dive into that. But I think this is commonly why people use alcohol, is to help them kind of cope with stress. But it disrupts your sleep. It's going to affect your gut function. It affects with hormones, and like I said, it is an internal stressor. One, because it's a poison, right? Alcohol. It's
a poison.
So when it comes into your body, I was talking to a patient about this earlier today, and she was like, "Oh, well, I only have a couple of drinks a few times a week. Like, that's not that much alcohol. Like, my husband drinks like a fish. He's the one who's got the alcohol problem." I'm like, well, she's sitting in front of me having a lot of symptoms, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of digestive stuff, skin stuff. And I was like, well, this is what happens. Your liver is, the thing that breaks down toxins and gets rid of things that our body doesn't want to have. And when alcohol comes in, your liver's going to stop doing whatever else it was doing, whether it was breaking down hormones or detoxing, getting rid of your fat cells or whatever else. Alcohol comes in, the body's like, oh, I better get rid of the alcohol. So the liver will jump ship and whatever else it's doing, and it will go focus on detoxing the alcohol. So you get the alcohol out there because that's a lot more important, but then your body's not doing some of these other functions that it should be doing. And if you do that chronically, we're going to start to see some problems, right?
Yeah, that's such an important point. Let me just stop you on
Yeah.
that point, because to say it clearly, the liver will stop doing everything else, including breaking down calories, and it will store that,
Yeah.
right? It'll be like, let me
Oh yeah.
put that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
aside, and
Yeah.
I've got to get rid of this toxin. That's going to become the priority. And
Yes.
so that affects so many things like weight gain, but also you mentioned hormones. And, if you're on a hormone patch or something like that, your liver, everything goes through your liver. Your liver has to put all that aside, processing medicines and everything else
Yep.
to process this toxin. And I like how you use the word poison, because that's truly how your liver
It
sees it.
is. Yeah. I mean, it is. And, and no offense to anyone who's using it. I mean, it's a toxin or a poison that's been around for a long time, but it definitely is a poison. Um, but I think the bigger issue that I think a lot of people, I have a lot of conversations with people about their alcohol. Like, hey, how much do you drink? I always laugh. This is funny. Like, I ask people about their diet. What do you eat for breakfast?
Yeah.
What do you eat for lunch? What do you eat for dinner? And then I'll be like, and what do you drink? And the people that are like, oh, I do coffee and water. I usually know that I'm gonna be like, have it off. I'm like, oh, I don't really drink that much. But I'm like, what do you drink? They're like, oh, bourbon and wine. And I'm like, no, I didn't mean alcohol. I meant like, what do you drink during the day? And they're like, oh, sorry, I mean water. I drink water and seltzer water. But it's interesting. But
yeah, people associate the word drink with alcohol.
Yes.
Like,
yes,
so when you're at a restaurant and people say, what do you want to drink? That's why a lot of times people who are stopping alcohol have a hard time with that question, because we're so not used to saying water or iced tea or something else.
Yeah. But we're getting back to, I was going to talk about, again, we use alcohol as a way to help us cope with stress. But then again, this like gets you into this vicious cycle where, yes, you feel better maybe for the 1 or 2 hours while you're drinking, but then it disrupts your sleep. The next day, you're more likely to, not make the best choices. You might skip a workout, or maybe you do a workout, but your body's not in a great state, so it's not a great workout. You might, snack, eat more sugar, because it's going to affect your blood sugar regulation. And so that's another big one where we see a lot of like mood irregularities. People, when they're not drinking, they might not be as nice, or they might be grumpy, or they might be, and kind of think of it as alcohol withdrawal, but it really is how alcohol is impacting the blood sugar. And when we get spikes and dips, you will see mood, right. So then people are like, I don't feel like myself, let me have another drink. And so then they drink again. And this you get caught in this cycle, and you feel like, I can't handle stress until I have my drink. But typically people only really feel good while they're drinking. Right. And and I know you and I've had this conversation many times before. Alcohol is also a depressant to the central nervous system. So if you struggle with depression or anxiety and you're drinking even just a couple times a week, you are going to have a negative impact on your mental health.
Yeah.
And again, this is also another cycle. People are like, well, you feel good while you're drinking because it loosens you up, and you're like, oh, it happens, you don't really care. But then as soon as that alcohol's detoxed out of your system, you feel even worse, right?
Right.
And so then again, it leads you to want to drink again. And so it can be not a great cycle, but I think the big thing I have, like again, I had this patient in my office this morning who, she said she drank 3 times a week, maybe 1 or 2 drinks. And she was coming in for severe depression and with a touch of anxiety. And I asked, I was like, well, have you ever cut out drinking? She's like, oh, it's not alcohol. Alcohol's not my problem.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, then we had a good conversation about it. Like, well, how would you feel if I asked you to stop drinking? And she like laughed. She's like, well, I don't know about that. She's like, I don't think it's the problem. I'm like, well, it probably is. I don't know if it's a whole problem, but it's probably contributing to it. It's definitely not making it better. And she's like, well, that would make me a little bit uncomfortable. I was like, well, it's good to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Because if the thought of not drinking for, let's say, a month makes you uncomfortable, it's probably a good time to look at your relationship. And you can talk to this more than I can, but right, like it's a.
Well, I love how you actually ask those questions, though. A lot of doctors don't. And it does make people uncomfortable. And what we've been taught is to sort of shy away from that discomfort. But now through coaching, we get people to be curious about it. Well, let's think about that. If you're uncomfortable taking a break from alcohol, let's dig deeper into that.
Yeah, let's find out why.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. I try to maintain in my office and like a judgment-free zone. I'm not going to judge. Like, I'm human. I've used plenty of alcohol, and I can talk about that in a minute. But I think being in a safe space where you feel like you can talk to your provider or your coach about all these different feelings. Well, hey, I feel uncomfortable with this, and maybe I want to stop drinking, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah. So on my podcast, I'm really big on like making sure if you're struggling with any part of your health journey to have a provider that you feel safe talking about all of these things. You don't feel like they're going to judge you or they're going to, shame you because of whatever habits that you have, right? I mean, the interesting thing, being in the doctor's perspective is, I run a lot of lab work, and I can always tell if someone's drinking too much alcohol, or maybe they're not drinking a lot of alcohol, but if the alcohol that they're drinking is having an impact on their physical body.
What
So
do you
there's quite a
see?
few numbers. So typically, I mean, the kind of the common knowledge ones, we'll see liver enzymes go up. So there's a liver enzyme called ALT and AST, and typically in a really heavy drinker, you'll see those liver enzymes be elevated. There's also another liver enzyme called GGT, which is very specific to alcohol. So if your GGT is elevated, it is like a number one, hands down, like you're clearly drinking too much alcohol for your system. The other liver enzymes, there are other things that can cause them to go high. So if those are high, like I have patients that don't drink alcohol and they're high, and they can get other causes. But GGT is specific to alcohol. So it's an enzyme that the liver makes to help it process things. When there's been a lot of alcohol damage, the body will make a ton of that enzyme. So it's a pretty easy way for a practitioner to be like, yeah, you're definitely drinking too much. But the other interesting thing is when you drink enough alcohol where it's having an impact on your system is your red blood cells will actually get a little bit too big. So there's a marker in what's called your complete blood count called macrocytic volume, and it's measuring the size of your red blood cells. And it's supposed to be of a proper size because that's what carries hemoglobin and it allows cells to get delivered oxygen, right? Now, when, alcohol can cause the red blood cells to burst and it can make them it makes them get a little bit bigger. So when we see elevated MCVs on a lab, there's a couple other causes for that. Sometimes it can be B12 deficiency or folate deficiencies, but if someone's B12 and folate levels are fine and their MCV is big, and that's usually the cause of when people get like a really red nose or a red face from drinking, usually we'll see that on their labs, their MCVs will be really elevated. So that's I always laugh sometimes, people are like, yeah, I don't really drink that much. I'm like, well, you're definitely drinking too much. Your reviews don't really lie. So this is a message, don't lie to your doctor because they're always going to know.
Right.
They know when you're lying. Yeah.
Well,
So you can really see the impact that alcohol, and think about that, alcohol is having an impact on your red blood cells, which are delivering oxygen to every cell in the body. So if your red blood cells are too big, the oxygen delivery is not going to go as well, which we think about getting oxygen to the brain or, again, muscle cells or anything. This is where chronic alcoholism can start to cause fatigue and whatnot over time. So, yeah.
Well, I could imagine if I was listening to this podcast right now, I'd be going, well, I don't drink that much, because even if I was, because we think, well, it's only the person who is like at end stage, needs medical intervention, must be having these numbers. Is that true?
Yeah. Oh, no. I'm talking about women that maybe they drink like 3 glasses of wine at their book club, and maybe they go out on a Saturday night and have a couple of cocktails. And this is going to be, how sensitive is your body? How healthy is your liver? How much is your body able to actually detox that alcohol? Because if you're not good at detoxing, then that alcohol is going to stay in your system a little bit longer and it's more likely to cause more damage. And there are a lot of people that don't detox as well as others, right? And, it's interesting. I treat a lot of women like perimenopausal and going through menopause. And when we go through menopause, the system becomes a lot more sensitive to alcohol. It's more sensitive to everything, right? The body's going through all these changes. But I'll see women that, they used to drink a lot and then they try to drink that same amount through menopause and their body just goes crazy.
Right.
It's because during menopause, when you stop losing a monthly cycle, your period is a way with which your body detoxes. When we don't have that anymore, it puts a little more stress on the other routes of elimination, like the sweat glands and the bowels and the kidneys. So when you drink more, it's just there's a more toxic overload during menopause because the body's trying to readjust to losing one of the detox routes. So we tend to see alcohol have a bigger impact for that age demographic.
Yeah. We're gonna edit this part out.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you have a microphone by chance? You're real.
I do have a mic. Yeah, it's here.
You're saying such good stuff, but you're sounding like in a tin can or something.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Repeat some stuff. Is that better if I get here?
Yeah, I think if you're closer.
Yeah, I'll get closer. Better.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Because I'm like, oh gosh,
sorry.
That's really good information.
Okay, sorry about that. This is why I need the guy to come in person because they tell me have the mic back close to you. I'm actually gonna put a book under this stuff because I don't think it's very close. Okay.
Let's hear you say so. Yeah.
Hello. Better.
Better. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Let's go back to that interesting point about menopause.
Yes.
Because so many women are experiencing hot flashes and dehydration and they're not feeling well, they're feeling bloated and they're drinking and they're taking maybe hormone replacement. How does alcohol impact all of that?
Well, again, if we think about the physiology that we talked about earlier, when alcohol comes into the body, the liver is going to prioritize detoxing that. But if the liver is already a little bit overloaded because, let's say, you're on an estrogen patch, you're taking hormones, or maybe you're taking other medications, right? It just puts a heavier burden on the liver. And because when you're in menopause, you're no longer bleeding, and a monthly bleed is one of the body's ways of detoxing all your other detox routes. So that would be like sweat glands, that would be feces, that would be urine, have a higher burden. So alcohol is, you're going to feel the effects of alcohol more so than you did maybe in your 20s or your 30s when you were cycling. And what this can look like is alcohol can make hot flashes worse. It can make insomnia worse. It can make anxiety or anxiety a lot worse, right? And I mean, I see so many women that will be like, oh my God, I used to be able to drink XYZ when I was, when I turned 45, and then I feel like I have one glass of wine and I don't sleep well and it's a mess and I get, I get flushed and like I said, I was talking about the labs earlier. I see alcohol have more of an impact on the physical body in labs during that menopause time.
Yeah,
So,
that's so interesting. I never thought
yeah,
of when you have your period, that's a form of detox. That
it
is such an
is. It's a
interesting point.
monthly detox,
Of
right?
course.
So there are a lot of patients that are on the birth control pill and they skip their period. They'll take the pill like
Right.
month round, and I just caution them. I'm like, hey, like this, you're supposed to get a bleed. It's why women live longer than men, right? We clean out our blood every month, but then you go through this time where we lose that, and the body has to like all of a sudden again, it puts more stress on the other routes of detoxification.
Wow.
And alcohol has to be detoxed. So if you're adding more things that have to be detoxed, it's just going to put more stress on those things.
Yeah, makes total
caffeine
sense.
is another thing that I talk about with a lot of patients, because caffeine is, usually the body will do alcohol first and caffeine is second in terms of like detox priority. But so, if you're also drinking a lot of caffeine, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be drinking caffeine, but if you're drinking a lot of caffeine to make up for the alcohol that you drank the night before, you're putting a lot of stress on your body, right?
Yeah, not even mentioning dehydration from both of those.
Well, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing we haven't even talked about is alcohol depletes a lot of your nutrients. It's going to deplete your magnesium. It's going to deplete your B vitamins. When we're in med school, you learn about, fetal alcohol syndrome, which is when, a mother drinks throughout a pregnancy. And typically, if someone is an alcoholic, their levels of vitamin B2, all the B vitamins are low, but B2 and thiamine, so B1, get so low that you can start to get like, actually the brain stops working properly. But when you have those levels really low during a pregnancy, it will affect the fetus's brain. But so alcohol, if you're at the point where you're drinking, all of your meals and you're not eating, your B vitamins will get so low that nothing really works right in the body when you don't have B vitamins, because they're the major cofactors. B vitamins and magnesium are the biggest cofactors in the system. Yeah. And when your magnesium gets low, guess what? Your anxiety is going to go up, your depression is going to go up, your stress is going to feel more overwhelming, your energy is going to go down, you're not going to sleep as well. And magnesium is so important. And if you're doing caffeine and alcohol, your magnesium is going to be really low.
Most people are walking around low in magnesium. And so I want to go back to that nutrient absorption, because that was a big problem for me. But by the end of my drinking, my gut was a mess. Because I was just causing problems and damage to my gut, and I was not absorbing nutrients. So when I stopped drinking, I did take a bunch of B vitamins and a lot of healing supplements. So can you speak to that, what alcohol does to your gut microbiome and the lining of your gut?
Yeah, I mean, it does a lot of things. So first thing, we'll talk about the lining. Alcohol dehydrates you, as we've been saying. When you dehydrate the body, you will affect the cells that line the mucosa in the small intestine, so the gut lining. And when those guys get dehydrated, you can develop what's called leaky gut. And leaky gut basically means whatever's coming into the small intestine, the things in the small intestine are supposed to get absorbed, but they get absorbed only when the body wants to. So there's very specific receptor proteins throughout those cells that will, hey, like I'm going to absorb calcium only. I'm going to absorb sodium. I'm going to absorb proline and lysine. With leaky gut, those things will they pass through the small intestine lining without going through their receptor. And so sometimes the body can start to develop an immune reaction to that. And so eventually what will happen is the lining of the gut will actually get damaged because of the immune reaction that will happen. And then you go to eat anything, you're not going to actually absorb those nutrients. Mm-hmm. So, and yours is a good case, to look at. You stopped drinking, so you're like, oh, I should be better. But unfortunately, it takes some time to heal leaky gut, right?
Yes.
So, and if you are already low on nutrients and not absorbing nutrients, your body needs those nutrients to heal that lining. So it can just take a little bit longer, but it's something to consider. I have some patients that will tell me, they're like, hey, I gave up drinking for 2 months, but I didn't feel any better, so I went back to it. It's going to take a little longer than 3 months for your body to heal from, some of the damage that's happened there.
A little longer than 3 months, and I think also, don't you think they need some supplements and some things to help?
Yes, I think it's good to, be looking at your diet and looking at some other things to help heal that lining. But so the second way that alcohol can impact the gut is it is going to affect, the microbiome or the flora, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And it does this in multiple different ways. One, it's going to affect the liver. It's going to affect the production of bile. It's going to affect breakdown of things in the stomach and then the small intestine. So sometimes you get like larger, clunkier molecules of things that actually can't be absorbed, but they'll be food for the bad bacteria. So we sometimes see like an upregulation of bad bacteria, not enough growth of the good bacteria, and that can cause all kinds of problems. That can actually start to cause problems with your estrogen metabolism, with estrogen levels in general. It can cause problems with thyroid conversion, T4 to T3 conversion. And not to mention just give you crazy symptoms like bloating and gas and just feeling generally uncomfortable from a GI perspective. And some of those things can get better pretty quickly when you stop, putting the alcohol into the system.
Definitely.
But I know for myself, like I don't tolerate alcohol very well. I'm not even close to menopause, but I've never tolerated it that well. I have, and I think we're going to talk about this later, I have a pretty bad mutation of the MTHFR mutation, which means I don't detox as well, and we'll dive deeper into that.
Okay.
And so when alcohol comes into my system, it takes a little bit more of a toll. But one of the first symptoms I get is I don't digest my food well when I drink alcohol. So when I discovered this in my 20s, I would be like, if I eat a meal and I drink, I get like bloating, gas, diarrhea. I would feel terrible. So I would usually be like, if I'm going to drink, I won't eat. Well, guess what that did? Like blackouts. And
I think
it was fun, but a lot of people have that same thing.
A lot of women do that.
A lot of women do that. And it's interesting because alcohol, wine and particularly in low levels, can be like a digestive. It can actually help with, but for some people, because of its poisonous nature, it gets into the stomach and it's stressful to the system. So it shuts off digestive capabilities. So then whatever you're eating, you're not digesting and you don't feel very well. So if you're someone that's drinking alcohol and the next day, like your digestive tract is really out of whack, you have diarrhea, you're bloating, you have gas, guess what? Alcohol is really not your friend.
That's how I was. Yeah, that was me. And the power of denial is so strong. I'd be like, oh, it must be dairy. It must be gluten. It couldn't be the alcohol because I didn't want to let that go.
Yeah. It's crazy how strong of a hold it will get on your brain. I eventually, it took me probably the better part of a decade to be like, I really don't actually feel so great when I drink. And I still drink occasionally, but I feel so much better when I don't. Yeah. And I think the other thing that, because it has such an impact on gut health, and particularly my gut health, when I drink, my ADD gets worse, my brain fog gets worse, the next day. My anxiety, I have a history of depression, and, I think when I don't drink, my mood is fantastic. Even if I start drinking just a little bit, I notice downward trends, and I'm lucky enough to be in this situation where I see what it can do to people and what cutting it out can do to people. So I'm always like, oh, that's good. They cut that out and they feel that much better. So I kind of get a reinforcement all the time of like, hey, you probably are going to feel better when you're not drinking.
Well, you bring up a good point because it's awareness. And, you being in the medical field, you're very aware. You're seeing it in patients, and you were in medical school when you started to notice this about yourself.
Yes.
But it's when we're not aware and we don't want to be aware, we don't want to see it, that we can stay stuck in this drinking cycle, even though our health isn't doing well. And most of the people I coach are very health conscious, and they're literally splitting hairs between, should I have olive oil or canola oil? Should I have stevia or regular sugar? And yet not looking at the alcohol piece. And I did it for years. So no judgment. It's just what we do because we're afraid to give it up for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes you don't want to give it up because you're worried about what you might feel if you don't have it there, like what emotion is going to come up that it's been kind of helping you keep it at bay, right?
Yeah. So it's all emotional regulation as well as physiological regulation, and it works together because you see people who have adrenal fatigue, and and like I did with you, and this is even post me stopping drinking. I still needed to come to you to get some help with the right supplements to get myself back on track. So if you're drinking and you have stress and adrenal fatigue and you're maybe emotional avoidance and you have a bad gut, what do you say to that person who comes in?
Who's still drinking?
Yeah.
I think I always come at a place where I'm going to meet people where they are, right? I always bring it up. I would tell them, I have to have this conversation. My first job is to do no harm and to tell you all the things that could be possibly doing you harm. And usually I kind of gauge where they are with that. And some people will, it's like a very clear one they're not interested in. And I will say, hey, listen, we can do this work. Just know that, when you drink, it's going to make it harder for this healing journey to happen, right?
Yeah.
And it's really because every time you put alcohol in, it's just stealing the body's energy that it could be using to heal you, right?
Yeah.
So not that you can't see some progress, but it's going to be hard. And
Harder.
I have some patients that I've worked with for a while, and and I don't see much shift in that. And I would just say to them, hey, listen, I don't know if we can work together anymore until we like are able to have a conversation and really tackle this piece. But a lot of times, I think when people are coming to see me, they really want to get better,
Yeah.
right? So it usually like opens the door. And I have a lot of conversations with particularly my patients in their like 20 to 30 demographic. They don't like to drink alcohol as much. It's kind of cool, actually.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's really great. The 30s, my 30 somethings, they're still drinking, but a lot of them are very curious about not drinking.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting is I treat a lot of people that are in the same social circle. So there's like a group of like 5 friends, and they all will come in and they're like, this weekend we went out and there was so much drinking, and I just feel like crap, and I don't want to drink anymore, but I feel like I have to, and there's all this pressure. And I'll say to them, hey, all your friends are saying the same thing. So why don't you guys just, and so I'm starting to see a shift there where they're like, yeah, you know what? We're going to go do a sober activity together. We're going to go like try something out that's not drinking. So I do see a shift in like the younger demographic that they're realizing, hey, alcohol makes me feel like crap. I maybe want to do something else for my body.
Yeah,
right?
it's very encouraging to see that. But it is more the demographic my age and up.
Yes.
50 and up.
That demographic.
That are still drinking hard.
They're drinking hard, and they are not always willing to have the conversation about it. That's a little bit of a harder conversation. It's like I'll bring it up, and I can tell they get kind of like prickly, and walls go up a little bit. And I'm just like, listen, you might not like me for the next 5 minutes, but I'm going to tell you all the things that alcohol could possibly. I'm like, this is your body, and this is your choice, but and then I'll say like, we're going to look at your labs, and your labs will tell me like how much of an impact, and that sometimes can be very motivating for people, right? They look at me like, oh wow, actually I didn't realize that. Those 4 or 5 drinks that I'm having every week or every weekend or whatever it is, it's taking a toll on my body.
Yeah.
And, sometimes for people that are very data driven, the brain sees that and is like, oh, I mean, sometimes the people that really don't want to stop drinking, they'll come back with me and they'll be like, well, it could be these 5 other things. And I'm
right.
like, yeah, it could be, but probably
not. But, And you use the word journey, and I use it a lot too. I mean, it took me like 10 years from the time I started thinking, I'm drinking too much to actually
stop.
Completely ditching it, right? So you go in and out of it, and you try things, and you hopefully you get to that place, because it is an inflammatory agent that causes all these issues. But I love the point you brought up about showing them blood test. There's also this whole new technology of wearable tech. Like the Garmin watches, the Oura Ring, where you can see Can you talk a little bit about like what HRV is, why that matters, and how it affects
So HRV
alcohol?
stands for heart rate variability. So it's looking at kind of what your heart rate is doing. It's basically a measurement looking at how well your nervous system is adapting to things. And so when heart rate variability is not where we want it to be, that can indicate that we're doing something that's super stressful to the body, right? And so, patients will tell me like, oh, I notice when I drink, my HRV is terrible for tonight. Like I'm getting terrible readings, and even if you don't have something that measures HRV, just looking at your quality of sleep is a really good indicator. Because a lot of people will be like, I don't get deep sleep. I'm not getting REM sleep on the nights that I drink. And then your blood sugar, just like wearing a CGM or something like that, can be really helpful in terms of data to gather. Like, okay, and I've noticed this. I've worn a lot of CGMs, and
that's the glucose, continuous glucose monitor.
That's a continuous glucose monitor. Yeah. So I will notice that if I have any alcohol, even if it's just like half a glass of wine or something, and the next day my glucose is not stable. It will be all over the place. And when we think about blood glucose, I have this. We're a video, right?
Yep.
Okay. So like I always tell people that sorry, this is not great. If you're watching this, I have like a triangle analogy. I can't find my camera. So your thyroid, your adrenals, and your sex hormones are in this very delicate triangular balance. If one goes up, it's going to affect the other two. If one goes down, it'll affect the other two, right? Because they're all linked together. The thing that holds that triangle up is your blood sugar. So if blood sugar is doing this and it's all topsy-turvy, it's very, very hard for the body to keep those other hormones balanced, right? So if blood sugar is dysregulated, it's going to be hard to get your thyroid in check. It's going to be hard to get your sex hormones in check. It's going to be really hard to get your adrenals in check. So if we're drinking alcohol and it's causing major blood sugar dysregulation, it's going to be really hard to get those hormones in balance.
Oh, that is such an interesting point, because I do have so many women who are my clients who ask me, well, how does it affect my hormones? And so blood sugar, hormones,
that's
thyroid.
Usually like, I mean, it affects hormones that way because of the impact of blood sugar on the 3 major endocrine players. but also on the gut piece and the liver piece that we talked about earlier, right? So, if your liver's not able to break things down, we can get buildups of certain hormones and not enough of other ones. So, and not to mention, when alcohol is depleting all of these nutrients, you have to have magnesium and B vitamins in order to build hormones. Like the body doesn't just they don't just appear out of thin air. The body has to make them.
It's the
And
building blocks.
those are the building blocks. So if you're depleted of those guys, guess what? You're not making estrogen and progesterone, right? And if you're depleted in any sense, that also is kicking up your stress hormones. So when you're kicking up more stress hormones, you're not going to make as much estrogen and progesterone. So there's a lot of different ways that alcohol has an impact on your hormones. A lot.
Yeah, and it's it's so interesting because we can give everybody all this information, this physiological, scientific information. I had a lot of it as a personal trainer. I knew that, but it can still have this psychological hold on people, and you can just sort of be afraid. Well, what will I be like without drinking? How will I have fun without drinking? Will I be able to socialize without drinking? How will I transition from my work day to the rest of my day? These are all just habits. And that's what I talk about a lot is habit transformation and how to do that in a compassionate, non-judgmental way. But I imagine you're working on habit transformation too, to incorporate
100%.
these healthy strategies.
I mean, you have to, if you want to get results with anything, you have to be compliant. You have to do them every day. So, patients, like sometimes they're like, hey, I'm not great at taking pills. I'm like, okay, or taking supplements. Like, well, we got to work on building a habit of that if we want to see the results from these supplements. Buying them doesn't really get you there. You got to actually take them, right? Or like thinking about stopping drinking doesn't actually get you. You have to do it, and it just takes practice. And I think
and
I've had a conversation with patients that are. I don't think they have any sort of alcohol addiction, but they get nervous that they're not going to be able to be in a social situation without alcohol. And usually we'll have this conversation. I'm like, hey, you just need to go out and just try it. Just like give yourself a reference point. Because once our body has a reference point or it's done something, it's like, oh, and it can be like, oh, that wasn't that scary. Then you're more likely to go do it again. But sometimes you just have to give it a chance. Like, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to tell all my friends, or maybe you don't tell your friends, whatever, but you're just not going to drink and you're going to be like, oh, I actually am fun. I can still be myself without alcohol.
You have to prove it to yourself, and you have to be curious. And it depends when you tell people too. Like if you tell people, "Oh man, I'm not drinking because my doctor said I can't," and this really stinks. Versus, you know what, it just wasn't serving me, and I'm just going to take a break and see how that feels. Like it all depends how you tell other people and what you tell yourself too.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes, I know for myself personally, I've gone through plenty. I've been to plenty of social events where I don't drink, and sometimes I don't tell anybody. I'm just like, I'm going to go out, and I order a fizzy water or whatever and drink it. And I don't, because sometimes the less you say, the less there's going to be, people are going to bring up about it. They're like, why aren't you drinking? Are you pregnant? Are you this? They ask you all these questions and you're like, no, I'm just not drinking. And then they want to know why. And then as I learned from you, like people are like, well, wait, whatever their thoughts about their own drinking is going to come out. It's going to impact what they say to you. And
it's the mirror effect.
The mirror effect. Yes.
Looking in the mirror.
But it is good practice. Yes. Go do a social function and don't have any alcohol. Just see how, and even if maybe you feel bad, but that's good information for you to know.
Yeah.
And then when you come back and you are working with a coach or someone to help you through this, you can give them that information and they can help you like rewrite that story.
Yeah. I always ask my clients when they go through an event and they don't drink, I say, did you wake up the next morning and say, man, I wish I drank last night? And they're like, no,
nobody says that.
I'm so happy that I didn't do it. And, so you're teaching your brain. I want to flip to this because I don't know enough about this, and you mentioned it. The gene MTHFR gene mutation. Sure. What is that?
Okay, so this is a mouthful, but it stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, otherwise known. Can I curse on the show? Otherwise known as the motherfucker gene.
Oh my gosh, I could remember that.
It's MTHFR, right? You can remember that. So basically what this gene does is it codes for an enzyme that takes a methyl group, which is a carbon with 3 hydrogens, and it attaches that methyl group to folate, which is one of your B vitamins, B9. Now, folate is a really important B vitamin in so that it is a part of 2 major pathways in the body. The first one is detox. So it is one of the first kind of rate limiting steps in several of the detox pathways. So and the only way that folate can enter that pathway is if it gets methylated. So this little enzyme, so it's like you've got folate over here, and then the body has to attach something to it. This enzyme is the thing that attaches it there. So once the enzyme works and attaches the methyl group to the folate, then the folate can go in the detox pathway, and the detox pathway can operate.
Okay.
right? The other pathway that folate or methylfolate goes into is your neurotransmitter pathway. It'll go into building serotonin and dopamine and some other things. I'm simplifying this a little bit; it's a little bit more
Yeah,
complicated, but
it's good.
this is how I like to think about it. So
Simplify.
we've got the detox pathway, and we have a neurotransmitter building pathway. If you have a mutation in this MTHFR gene, it means that your body cannot methylate. It means it cannot attach that methyl group to the folate at the normal rate. So the
Okay.
way that I like to explain this to patients when I'm thinking about this conceptually is folate comes in. Let's imagine an assembly line, and you've got like 5 or 6 different stations at this assembly line. Station 3, let's say, is a station where this methyl group is supposed to be attaching, or the enzyme MTHFR is attaching this methyl group to folate. So the folate comes in, it gets to the station, and it's supposed to get out on the other side and then go to whatever pathway, detox or hormone, or excuse me, neurotransmitter building. When you have a mutation, it's like you've got a worker with one hand. They're not going to be going as fast. They're going to be going a lot slower. And so that if that is one of the rate limiting steps, which it can be, it means you're going to get a buildup of some substrate and not enough of something at the end. So typically with patients with a mutation in this, and I have the worst mutation of this. So there's several different gene codes in the MTHFR gene. So I methylate at like a 25% rate of the normal person. So basically, I don't detox very well. And
Okay.
if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, signs of this could be really sensitive, like you're sensitive to smells and perfumes and medications, you might not react a normal way, or alcohol, you're really sensitive to that, or maybe you don't sweat as much, or you just feel like you generally like don't tolerate things as well. It could be that it's an MTHFR thing. Now, there are ways to work around this. You can give your body the methylfolate, which is the already methylated folate. You can give your body some of the building blocks. But I usually, with my MTHFR patients, less is more when it comes to like substances in the system, because that methylfolate, again, the detox and the neurotransmitter building are the 2 big ones, but there are other pathways that it works in, right? And sometimes what we'll see is, again, issues with detox, and clinically, patients with MTHFR with one of the gene mutations, we can see an increased rate of cardiovascular disease, of like cholesterol stuff, because you can't detox some of the toxins that affect the cardiovascular system. We also tend to see an increase of anxiety and depression because of you might not be building your neurotransmitters as well as someone who methylates at a normal rate. So it has an impact on a lot of different things. Now, there's for a while it was like, oh my god, if you have MTHFR, you do this. So granted, I have that mutation. It doesn't mean that I don't methylate. Their body has many other pathways, right? So
But something like alcohol that requires...
Yes, it's something like alcohol. And if you're super stressed, or and alcohol, because it is a stressor in the system and it's a toxin by its detox, has a pretty big impact on people with MTHFR. So it's a cool thing to check for. And
you can test for it?
Oh, you can test for it. It's a gene test. Yeah, it's usually have to do like a saliva or through blood. If you do have that mutation, you want to be really careful with folic acid, which is the synthetic form of B9, of folate. That's what you see it in a lot of supplements. They also enrich a lot of flours and a lot of things. So if something says enriched flour, that's going to have a really high content of folic acid in it. Now, folic acid has to have several extra steps done to it before the folate can be ready to be methylated. So it just puts an extra burden on someone who has MTHFR. So a lot of patients who don't feel well when they eat like processed foods or carbs, maybe it's from the gluten or the carbs, but oftentimes it's actually from the really high buildup of folic acid that they're consuming. So, and the other thing you want to look at is in a lot of supplements, particularly supplements like B vitamins, they put a ton of folic acid, especially the cheap one. So you want to look for either folate, which is the natural form, that's what we get from food, or you can take methylated folate, which is folate that already has that methyl group attached to it.
Okay.
And so then you're kind of bypassing that, right? So it's just kind of interesting to look at that.
It is, because some people just ignore that and they're like, I guess I just don't process alcohol well, but they still keep drinking. And then you mentioned something else that I often talk about with my clients is alcohol depletes your neurotransmitters.
Yes.
So even though you get that hit on the front end of the massive dopamine hit, and it affects GABA and serotonin as well, eventually your body starts pulling back from its own production and maybe less receptors. So the very feel-good neurotransmitters that you want are being depleted by alcohol. So that's another system that's affected as well.
Oh, yeah. And then the interesting thing is, like, I don't know that I've read a study on this, but I think about this often. Like, if you have an MTHFR mutation and you are maybe already suffering from depression and anxiety, sometimes that population maybe more likely to drink because they're trying to self-medicate, right? But then
Yes.
they get caught in a worse cycle or loop because the
Mm-hmm.
alcohol, yes, it makes them feel good for a minute, but they're actually making their neurotransmitter depletion even worse, right?
Yeah,
So
it's
it's an interesting
self-medicating.
thing, yeah, to ask your doctor to like, hey, can you do this MTHFR test? You used
Yeah.
to be able to get it done in the 23andMe. You could do that whole genetic sequencing.
Uh-huh.
I don't think they actually test for MTHFR that one anymore. So, but it is a test you can do. You can do it through blood. Insurance doesn't always like to cover it, but there are some like labs that you pay like $90 or something, and you can get a couple mutations in that. And so I think it's a saliva test.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you think you're a person who does not process alcohol well and you're noticing some of these symptoms, you could go see Dr. Kinney and
Yeah, we can help you with
be
that.
tested
Yeah.
for this. So I just think it's so interesting when you look at all the systems that alcohol affects, and it touches every cell. It goes right through the blood brain barrier, even nothing holds
Yes.
it back. So it does affect everything in the body. Like what would be your, if parting comment to people about reevaluating alcohol when they're trying to take care of their health?
Um, I mean, I think just having an honest conversation with yourself first. Like,
Yeah.
hey, what is my relationship with alcohol? Like, I think
Yeah.
starting there and getting really clear on, is this something I could give up? Is this something I'm really struggling with? Do I need help in this regard? Because, I think, and I know you talk about this a lot, like white knuckling or trying to like do this on your own is not always that helpful. Not that
Yeah.
you need to go to AA or that's what I love about
Right.
your work is that it doesn't have to look like what we think it looks like, right? It could, it can be a little softer than that. It doesn't mean that you're like an alcoholic, right? It just means
Yes,
like
you
you're
don't need to
not.
label or judge. You can
Yeah,
just, with curiosity and self-compassion,
with
take a look at
exactly.
things.
And I think sometimes this is what I often suggest to patients. I'm like, hey, we're gonna cut out alcohol for a month. We're gonna start with a month. We're
Exactly.
gonna start with a week. We're gonna start with like baby steps, and we're gonna gather data, and we're gonna see how we feel.
Yeah,
And
gather data.
in my situation, we're also doing a lot of other things, which I think sometimes can be really helpful because, like we talked about earlier, sometimes you cut out alcohol because of the long-lasting damaging effects of alcohol. You don't actually feel the benefits for a while,
Right.
right? You might not feel physically. I mean, you feel a little bit better, but you don't. You're like, wow, I think I would
Yeah.
feel so much better. But if we're also doing some of these other things, if we're like, getting your nutrients back into on track, and we're like getting your
Yes.
gut in a good place, you might actually feel the effects faster. And usually what I say to people, I'm like, okay, so we're going to give up alcohol for whatever time we decide feels comfortable for them. Like, you actually may not want to go back and drink it, or after that month, you might go and you might drink a lot of it, but then you're going to be reminded of how crappy it makes
Right.
you feel. And sometimes that actually is helpful because
Yes.
you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize. Sometimes if you're drinking on a regular basis, you might not actually realize how crappy it's making you feel.
Exactly.
Because you're used to it.
And your
If you
body's
cut it
tried to
out-
adapt in
Exactly.
so many ways.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if you cut it out for at least 30 days, then you may drink again. You might be like, wow, I really feel like crap. Like, I got brain fog, my gut's out of whack. I can't focus. Whatever. I get hot flashes, and then it gives you, again, it's just more data for you to be like, oh, I guess alcohol
the
was
data.
really having a negative impact on my body. Yeah.
I think we should talk about doing a program together where we have people do a 6-week reset with me at the same time. You're giving them supplements, to help them with their vitamins, their gut health, their microbiome, everything that we talked about. That would be really interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, and we could, so that'd be cool to like run labs before and after too. You could see the changes.
That would be a great idea.
Typically, you can see changes pretty quickly when someone cuts out alcohol, like on the liver enzymes and some of the other things. It's cool.
I love that. Let's talk about that.
So let's talk about that after. Yeah, I think that's great. Good idea.
So what I love to ask people is, what do you do to be sober fit? And it could be mental, physical, emotional, all three.
Well, so for me, the first pillar for me is moving my body. Like, I got to do something to move my body every day. It's not always like intense exercise, although I do love a good workout. So usually I do that first thing in the morning. And if I can't do it first thing in the morning, I like to take a walk in the middle of the day or the afternoon. Because moving my body, particularly if it's outside, I feel like it just keeps my head super clear. I'm a big fan of, I go back and forth between a meditation practice and a gratitude practice. Some days I have time for, I like to meditate. When I meditate, I like to do it for a long time. So if I have enough time, I'll do like a longer meditation. And then I use that 5-minute journal, which
Mel
is
Robbins. I love her.
It's Mel Robbins, but she has a similar one, but it's fantastic. You're just writing down, 3 things you're grateful for, a couple things that'll make today great, and then at the end of the day, you look back on your day and you're like, wow, these 3 things happened and that was fantastic. And then you write like what would have made today better, but in a way that like you're not beating yourself up, right?
Yeah.
So those are the kind of non-negotiables for me. I've got to move my body, and I have to have some either meditation or gratitude practice every day. I also have a big spiritual practice. I talk to God. I mean, literally me talking to God is, hey, God, can you help me? You know, I look up and talk to God. And that, I think, really helps me. Like, it really helps me. And yeah, I think that's probably it. And then I think just trying to feel love and compassion for everyone in my life. And I think, you know, I've definitely I've struggled with depression and I've used alcohol.
We've talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes when I'm in a low place, I tend to think people don't like me. You know, you get that like depressed, like, oh.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think when I'm able to practice gratitude and like get that love feeling, I can feel so much better, right? Like,
I love that. The science of gratitude, it really is. It's so important. And so you're hitting them all, the spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental. So that's why Dr. Kinney is so great.
Oh, thanks. I mean, it is good to have all those pieces. And granted, I'll be honest, I don't do all those things every day, but I will notice if I don't do at least one of them, you know, every day for a while, I won't feel very good.
Me too. Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, and you know, the things I mentioned, they're all free. Like, you can do them anywhere, right? And you can do them while you're traveling. It's, you know, so yeah. Thanks for asking the questions.
Yeah, I love that. How can people find you? I know her. Dr. Kinney has the Kinney Clinic, but I want you to tell other people.
Sure. So you can go to my website. It's thekinneyclinic.com, and that talks about kind of what we do with the practice in the clinic. And then if you want to follow me and like listen more, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Dr. Kinney, or you can check out my podcast called The Dr. Kinney Show. And that's probably about it. And then we offer free 15-minute consults. So if you're like, hey, I want to know what it might be like to work for you, or to feel like, you know, you want to talk to me about what you've got going on, you can schedule one of those on our website. And happy to chat with you.
And I highly recommend Dr. Kinney. I have to say, she has helped me so much. And we just scratched the surface. There is so much you can talk about.
There's always so much to, Yeah, we'll do it again.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You.
Have you ever Googled, am I an alcoholic? Me too. And here's the thing. It's not a helpful question. Those quizzes just slap on a label. Yes, you are. No, you're not. But what if it's not about the label? And more about how drinking actually makes you feel. That's why I created Am I Drinking Too Much? It's the quiz I wish had existed when I was searching. No scare tactics, no rock bottom required. You'll get your results and a free guide that explains gray area drinking, plus 3 science-backed strategies to reduce or interrupt cravings. Take it at soberfitchick.com/MI. That's MI, as in, am I drinking too much? soberfitchick.com/MI.